Happy Tuesday evening. I've missed hanging out with you guys. Follow me on Instagram and you will know that I spent last week on a little getaway with my husband. It was truly wonderful, but I've missed being here hanging out with you guys. I am glad to be back. And we are going to talk tonight about answering the homeschool skeptics. We're going to talk about what to do if you are facing holiday gatherings with family or friends who are concerned about your choice to homeschool. And we're also going to wrap in a few other topics because the same concept applies to other things. Did it again. Left the volume on my tablet. Sorry about that. We are also going to talk about other topics because these same concepts apply not just to families who are concerned about your homeschool choices, but to other choices as well. That you can imagine what some of those things might be. So before we get started, let me take care of a few housekeeping details. I would love for you to share this broadcast if you are enjoying it or if you've watched before. If you're on Facebook, of course, you know how to do that. If you're watching in Crowdcast and you'd like to share, there's a little button up there, invite. Click on that, you'll find all the relevant links. You will get the best engagement in a Crowdcast video from your desktop. However, if you are watching from a mobile device, then may I recommend that you turn your video into landscape mode. And then you're going to want to push the little square to allow it to go full screen so that you can see it the best. You can then tap on where it says view chat and you'll be able to see the chat window. Also, we've got a poll down at the bottom. So if you click on the word polls where there's a little number 1, I'm curious to know if you have friends or family who are critical of your decision to homeschool. Maybe yes, maybe no, or maybe they're not openly critical of it, but they just seem a little skeptical or hesitant about it. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that, what your experience is there. And then also, you are watching, you've got a question. Feel free to click on the Ask the Question link at the bottom of the screen and put your question in. If you see questions there that you'd really like to hear an answer to, make sure to upvote them, because when we go to the Q&A session, we will begin with the ones that are at the top that have the most votes. Also, if you're watching this on a replay, you can watch at high speed. Not right now during the live video, but later on you'll be able to look down there at the bottom, click on the little gear icon, and watch me at 2 or 3 times the regular speed if you'd like to do that. Or you can click on the Ask the Question link, and you can jump right to a place in the video where we talk about any particular question that is of interest to you. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you're welcome to hop over here into Crowdcast to join us, or you can keep watching from where you are. And let's get started with tonight's topic. So we are talking about answering homeschool skeptics. We're talking about what happens if you're facing holiday gatherings with your family and you know or you suspect that there might be a little bit of concern, a little bit of pushback. So if you are here listening with me here on Facebook or Crowdcast, I'd love to know, have you had that experience at all? Have you had family who questioned your decision to homeschool, who raised concerns, who had any comments to share related to that? I would love to hear your story. So here's the interesting thing. When we're talking about family members who are concerned about our decisions, whether it be homeschooling, whether it be mom staying home or having a large family, or one of the mom emailed me about was they have a very limited use of technology, and that's something that's come up as a concern amongst family members as well. So all kinds of lifestyle choices that we might make that could cause a little friction or be the subject of some controversy around the holidays as we gather with family. So the very first thing that we need to do as we prepare to face these questions is that we need to understand the borders of our own responsibility. And I know that might sound like a strange concept, but let me give you an illustration that's a completely unrelated example. And then we'll use that analogy to cross-apply to thinking about criticism for family. So I want you to imagine that you're having lunch with a friend, and your friend is feeling very stressed, overwhelmed, and exhausted. You're asking her some about what's going on in her life, and this is what she tells you. She says, you know, my dad lives alone. My mom's passed away. My dad lives alone, and he's diabetic. And he just really does not make healthy eating choices. And so I'm having to prepare all of his meals for him because if I don't prepare his meals for him, he's just not going to eat right. And I just know he's going to pass away, and then I'll be as good as a murderer. I'll have blood on my hands because, it'll be my fault that he didn't eat healthy and that he died. Okay, so that's a, extreme and kind of, um, striking example. But I hope as you listen to that, you would be able to, at least in your own mind and maybe out loud for the benefit of your friend, think about where there may be some boundaries drawn, some borders drawn between her responsibility and her father's responsibility. So, as a daughter, she certainly has some responsibility to her father to love him, to care for him in his later years. However, she is not responsible for the choices that he makes. She can help him, she can encourage him, she can support him, and perhaps provide some meals. But if he makes choices that lead to certain consequences for him, certainly that will be sad and that will be hard. But there's a big difference between being sad about the choices that someone makes and taking responsibility, taking on blame or guilt for the choices that someone else is making. So, for example, when she begins to say, well, if he dies, then I don't have blood on my hands. The father will be like, kill him. Well, no, that's not true. Just because there's something that we could have done that maybe perhaps might have helped that we didn't do doesn't mean that we are then responsible for the other person's choices and for the consequences that come out of their choices. But of course, even if we don't feel that we're responsible, it still might be true that you're feeling sadness and that we're affected by the results of those choices. But there's a distinction there between feeling sad about it and feeling guilty for it or responsible for it. Okay, so now let's take that same example and let's boil it down to a more kind of a gray fuzzy area when it comes to something like, for example, a peaceful family gathering, right? We all wish or hope that our family gatherings, our holiday family gatherings could be peaceful and could be encouraging and enjoyable. You see pictures on holiday cards or magazines or whatever. It looks like it's just so lovely. It's this warm, fuzzy, happy family time, and we would all love that, right? And we all understand that everybody plays a role in helping a family gathering to be peaceful and peaceable. But we have to learn how to draw boundaries and draw some distinctions between what we can do to help a situation and what is actually our responsibility, or what we would be right to feel some guilt for and what we would not be right to feel some guilt for. So, for example, it's very tempting to feel like, if I say anything, then I'm going to be disrupting the peace, or I'm going to be upsetting my mother-in-law, or I'm going to be, adding tension to this gathering. Well, if this is a conversation that has, that you've had about this isn't something that I want to talk about, or why we've made these choices, and someone in your family is continuing to press the issue and continuing to bring up things that you are then having to field or defend yourself against, respond to, then we need to start to think about where is this disruption of our responsibility, and where is it? Yes, maybe there are some things that we can do that will handle the problem in a smoother way, and some things that we can do that perhaps might add fuel to the fire, but not blaming ourselves or placing responsibility on ourselves for the peace being disrupted when someone else is making choices that are causing that difficulty. So, if your mother-in-law is saying things that are frustrating or hurtful, or if your uncle is teasing children and it's causing them some frustration or anxiety related to their family gatherings, and you feel like you need to say something, then okay to think of this not as, oh, if I say I'm going to be disrupting the peace and I'm going to be causing a problem, someone else's choices are causing this problem. And I'm not responsible for those choices, but I am responsible for the way in which I respond to them. So one of the first things that we can do in order to begin to address it or think about how to address it is to consider the motives behind the comments that they're making or the reactions that they're having to homeschooling. Now, kind of obvious, surface, expected motive might be that they're concerned for you or for your children. And in some ways, that's comforting. And in other ways, it's a little bit unnerving. But, for example, perhaps your family is concerned about you, the homeschool mom. And what is this like for you if you're home all day long? And it's going to be too tiring for you. Are you going to have the information or the experience that you provide this information for your children? Perhaps they're concerned about the children. Perhaps they're worried that the children are going to miss out on opportunities, or the old famous question of socialization. Are they going to have friends? So it is possible that their concerns are what you might expect or what you might anticipate when someone has concerns about homeschooling. Why are they worried? What particular things are they expressing that might be a concern? But the concerns can be sometimes hidden or a little bit deeper. There can be things under the surface that you might not immediately notice or be able to tell, but if you think about it a little bit, listen close, kind of read between the lines a little bit, there could be other things going on. For example, and this is a big one, insecurity. So my husband taught me, as his father taught him, that everyone has insecurities. And sometimes when we can't understand why a person is behaving the way that they're behaving, it's a good starting place to ask yourself, what insecurities are being touched here? What fears might be in the mix here? And so, for example, especially when we're dealing with something like homeschooling, even though it's a movement that's growing, it's still, relatively speaking, a very small minority of people who are making this choice in the United States at this time. And so chances are you were not homeschooled. Chances are you've got family members who are not homeschooling their children. And so your decision to homeschool could be touching a nerve for them. Perhaps they're concerned that because you've chosen this, what might seem like to them a really super hard, super strict, super extreme way of parenting, that perhaps you think poorly of them. So maybe your brothers or sisters or brothers and sisters-in-law are concerned that you might think that they're bad parents because their children are in public school or private school. Perhaps your parents are worried that because you've chosen to do things so differently than what they did with you, they're concerned that this is because you're making a judgment on them. I don't want to be raised the way my parents, I don't want my children to be raised the way my parents raised me. So I'm going to do a 180 and I'm going to do it completely differently because I'm rejecting how they've raised me. So, it could be, they could be hearing this, even if you don't intend it, they could be hearing it as a criticism of or a rejection of how they are doing things. Another reason that isn't immediately obvious might be that they themselves are actually facing some pushback from, their extended family or from friends in the community. And this is one that it might be hard to tell if that's what's going on. But we are used to fielding questions and funny comments, and we spend a fair amount of time thinking about appropriate responses. What about socialization? We've all thought about it. We've all talked about it. But what if you are one step removed? What if you are the grandmother of a homeschooler or the sister-in-law of a homeschooler, and you are now feeling comments and questions? Imagine if a grandmother is talking with her friends. Her friends are expressing concern or skepticism about this weird thing called homeschooling. It can be a little more difficult to defend yourself because you don't even have the perspective that the actual homeschool mom might. You don't have all the facts and the details and you haven't done all the reading, you haven't done all the research, you haven't collected all this anecdotal evidence about how things are unfolding in your home. So it can be much more challenging to be one step removed and fielding those questions, even though, as the homeschool mom, you feel like you are under fire. In some ways, it can be more challenging to be, the grandmother or the aunt or the sister-in-law or something who's fielding those criticisms, and she doesn't have maybe the same arsenal that you do. So if you think about all of the different motives or reasons or fears or insecurities that are driving these concerns, that really can help us to understand why our conversations may not go as smoothly as we would have hoped when we begin to sort of defend our homeschooling choices. So let me illustrate it like this. Let's say, for example, that your sister-in-law begins to question or criticize your decision in homeschool. And the language that she's using sounds like she's talking to you factually about homeschool. So maybe she says, I don't know, you don't have a teaching degree. Are you even qualified to do this? And so your natural response might be to talk about how homeschoolers often get excellent test scores, and the research that you've done about how a child's brain develops and how homeschooling is so much better to be able to allow them to learn at their own pace. Well, if the reason for your sister-in-law's question was simply because she wasn't sure if homeschooling is a valid academic or educational path, then your answers might help her or satisfy her. But if her underlying motive is, and she may not even realize this herself, but if her underlying concern is, my sister-in-law might think that I'm a bad parent because I put my children in public school. But she doesn't come right out and say that. Instead, she talks about, educational concerns. If you're responding to her educational concerns with educational statistics about how wonderful homeschooling is, you might actually be compounding the very fear, the very insecurities that she is dealing with. And again, it can be tricky because she might not come right out and say, the fact that you homeschool makes me feel really insecure, and I wonder if you're judging me as a parent, and do you think that you're better than I am? And do you think I'm a bad mom for putting my kids in public school, right? She might not be saying any of that out loud. But what she really might need is just to hear you say things like, well, it's not all good. There are some tough parts. I don't think it's for everybody. We're thankful to be doing this right now, but we're just taking it year by year and thinking carefully about what we should do. We're thankful that it's providing these benefits, but it also has these challenges that go along with it. And we really think it's important for every family to do what's right for them. Now, it can be extremely challenging to do that when you feel like you're under fire. It's very difficult to be gracious and emotionally generous when you feel like you're in a corner and you're needing to defend yourself. So, it takes a lot of wisdom and a lot of careful thinking and careful listening to know how best to interact or feel those kinds of responses. But think about, for example, if you're dealing with a grandparent or, somebody who's removed a step or two from your homeschool, and they're fielding from their friends. So it may sound as though they're criticizing you. Perhaps they're saying, yeah, but what about getting into high school? Are they going to be able to take high school classes if they don't, have a transcript from middle school? And so perhaps it sounds on the surface as though they are criticizing you, or they are speaking as though you don't know what you're doing, or you're messing up your children. But what if perhaps the reasoning behind it is that they're fielding these questions from their friends, and they are left without an answer, and they feel foolish and they feel embarrassed because they don't really know how to answer these questions, and they're really hoping that you have a plan, and they're really hoping that there are some good solid answers that would both comfort them and, something that they could then give back to their friends. But, we don't realize sometimes that when we make a choice, we, to some extent, understand that we're setting ourselves up to need to be an advocate for that lifestyle when we decide to do that. We're going to homeschool. It's kind of weird. We're going to need to be prepared to interact with people who are, don't have any other exposure to this besides their interaction with us. What we don't often realize is that when we make a choice to have a kind of a different lifestyle, and especially something that's kind of obvious and outwards, like our children are homeschooled instead of being in public school, or we have 8 children instead of 2, we actually are signing up all of our family members to some extent to be advocates, or at least, the face of homeschooling, or some other lifestyle choice to the world, whether they wanted to do that or not. And they may wind up, feeling the same kinds of questions and criticisms that we do. And without, as I said before, the research and the answers and the anecdotes that we have had, that we have collected in order to help us face those. So part of what might be helpful in that situation is just to commiserate, really, to share some with your relative who is struggling there, maybe some of the struggles that you face, and to explain some of the ways that you on, maybe even to explain what we just talked about, how sometimes people address specific concerns, but really what's beneath it is just, am I a bad person because I'm not doing that? Do you think less of me? I make different choices. And, maybe even helping to arm your relatives with the ways to respond when family members or, their friends or their connections are bringing to them some of the same concerns that you face from your family members and connections. So what else? Are there other things that you've come across? Are there other reasons you've heard people talking about reasons, like behind the scenes reasons, or maybe like below the surface reasons for why they're concerned about your homeschooling choices, or are there specific things that people have addressed with relation to your homeschool choices? While you're thinking about that and sharing, you've got some other answers that I haven't talked about yet. One of the moms who's on my email list emailed and shared that a struggle that she has with her family isn't necessarily with relation to homeschooling, but there's a little bit of friction related to technology. So in her home, they have very limited use of screens. I believe she said perhaps they don't have television, or they have very limited use of television. And that's something that seems to keep coming up with families, questioning about why they do that, and concerns that the children are not going to be prepared with knowledge of technology and technological skills that they can have. And I think many of the things that we've said tonight about homeschooling would apply in exactly the same way to something like technology. So again, this is something where people tend to feel they tend to feel like their toes are being stepped on. So, when you say, oh, we don't have a television and we don't use screens much, it's easy to hear that as, we're better than you because we make these more wholesome choices, whereas you're just a technology zombie and your kids are zoned out on the screens all the time. And, we're more, we're choosing more nourishing things for our children to do. And you may not be communicating that at all. That may not be your intention in the slightest, but it's easy for others to hear it that way, or to wonder if that's what you're thinking. And so, while you might be responding with statistics or with anecdotes and examples, what they really want is just a reassurance that, this is what's working for us. We're not doing this because we think that all other choices are immoral. We're doing this because, here are some of the problems that we've seen, or here are some things that, we struggle to know how to address, and the only way we could really handle that was by screen time, or, whatever might be your kind of the stories behind why you've made the choices you've made. And then just reiterating, every family has to do what's right for them. We don't believe that things are evil or immoral. We believe that they're a good tool, and we have to choose how best to use those in our family. And for us, for right now, this is what is helpful. So some of the same motives, insecurities, fears, concerns, pushbacks that families might face over your decision to homeschool, they might be feeling the same thing with regard to your decision to limit screen use in your there are a whole variety of other topics that can fall under the same category. So again, if you've chosen to have a larger family, or if you've chosen for mom to not work a traditional, full-time out of the house kind of job, or if you've chosen to do more, growing of your own food, or eating organic or whole foods, or just all kinds of things that you might choose that are facing some pushback. Just take a moment to step back and really listen and validate what they have to say. And then, if you do need to have conversations with them, you're having conversations not based on simply a defensive reaction on your part, but based on a real desire to love them well. Because remember, whatever their concerns might be about homeschooling or your family or your technologies or whatever the topic might be, chances are pretty good that what they do want is for you to be happy and healthy, and they do want for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever other holiday gathering to be pleasant and to be a time of family and enjoyment. And so if you are seeking to allay their fears or seeking to validate their concerns, just in terms of, appreciating their opinions or appreciating their perspectives, commiserating with them about how difficult it can be to get pushback from others, those kinds of things. If your goal be that their shared goal of wanting to have a peaceful family time, you often will have more success than if you take a position of, it's me against them, we've got to put an end to this, we've got to defend ourselves. However, even with all that being said and all those things considered, there are times where, for whatever reason, your gentle, thoughtful approaches to, responding thoughtfully and in love and considering their struggles is not being effective. And there are times where this goes beyond, an awkward moment, or, oh yeah, my, sister-in-law is probably going to make a comment and it's going to be awkward and then we're going to move on. And so in those situations, you're going to have to face the decisions that you make about the conversation you have from a perspective of not just what would be ideal, but reality, what's real, what are you actually dealing with. Yes, it would be lovely if, maybe in theory you had more strength of character and you could just, ignore those comments and they wouldn't bother you. Or maybe it would be ideal if your children didn't freeze under pressure and not have a good response with in-laws or questioning them about their multiplication facts or whatever the scenario might be. However, your family is who your family is. And so, sure, there are lots of ways that we can notice that we'd like to grow or that we'd like to talk about or improve on, but we really have to make decisions based on what actually is right now, what's actually happening, what our strengths and weaknesses actually are right in this moment. So, this is an example from a different category of life, but after having 8 babies, my abdominal muscles are not at all what they used to be, and I'm more prone now to lower back pain than I used to. So even if I, bend over and move laundry from the washer to the dryer in a not very ergonomically friendly way, I can wind up dealing with back pain. I have to be careful about things like vacuuming and certainly lifting boxes and stuff like that. And so, I can say to myself, well, I really should have done a better job at this point of strengthening my abdominal muscles. And if I'd done what I was supposed to do in strengthening my abs, then I wouldn't be having these problems and I could, lift these boxes out of the attic, or, unload this laundry more quickly. I could do these things if I had kept up with X, Y, and Z like I was supposed to, or like I could have or should have. And maybe that is all true. Maybe it's true that if I had been more disciplined about something in the past or something now, then I wouldn't have these struggles and these things wouldn't be a problem for me. Maybe that is true. But I really can't plan or make decisions based on a theoretical, ideal situation that isn't. I can only make decisions based on an actual reality of what is. And so I want to encourage you to do that same thing when it comes to interacting with your family. Maybe you are holding back from having an awkward or difficult conversation with an in-law and explaining to them how challenging it is to be faced with their criticisms or their skepticism, because you keep telling yourself, I shouldn't let it bother me. I shouldn't be so upset about this. I should be more thick-skinned. I should learn how to not take it personally. And yes, those things may be true, and there might be areas where you see that you have room for growth. But that does not change what is true right now as you head forward to this year's actual holiday gatherings and you're facing actual comments. And remember, history is a thing. So, even if you've grown over the past, it's still very challenging to face a relationship that has a history of past pain and difficulty. So, I would just really encourage you to keep those things into consideration. Hopefully, it's something you can discuss with your spouse, with your husband, talk about. This is what's happened in the past. What are we going to do if this comes up again? Especially if this is your husband's family that might be raising these concerns, he might need to be the one to begin that conversation or to be in charge of having that conversation. And, the kind of boundaries that you set or the kind of guidelines that you share about what you're comfortable talking about or what would be appropriate for them to ask the kids about has a lot to do with your family, what your family is able to handle, what your children are able to handle. So, it's not selfish, it's not mean to have to say, we would really appreciate, we would not quiz the children about what they've learned. That makes them feel anxious. It's really not helpful to us in, continuing on with their homeschool journey, or it's really not helpful in helping them to look forward with anticipation to our family gatherings. And you don't need to apologize for where you are as an individual, as a family, what your children are able to handle. Where you are is where you are. And you have to make your decisions based on what you and your family can handle right now. And if you're able to overlook it and you say, it's just awkward. I know she doesn't mean any harm. I don't particularly enjoy it, but I'm fine. And, we can just smile and nod and it's, water under the bridge, then that's great. It's certainly fine to do that. But if you find that you're not able to do that for whatever reason, then it is perfectly acceptable to have those conversations, address those issues, talk about them, and talk about them, hopefully with your spouse who's able to be there and see those same interactions and hopefully the process afterwards or ahead of time. So those are just some of the thoughts that I had about those types of conversations in all sorts of areas of life, but especially homeschooling, because it's just so weird. Such a less than common choice these days. So thank you all for joining me. If you are not already, please do follow me on Crowdcast. If you click up here by my name, hover over that, it will give you a little button where you can follow me, and then you'll be notified every time I go live, so you can hop on over here and listen. And very shortly, we're going to do something new. We are going to be adding the audio from these live videos to a series of podcasts. So you'll be able to actually listen in to the live videos in podcast form. Subscribe to the podcast so you can get those in audio version. That is an easier way for you to listen to the things we chatted about on the live video. So Okay, thank you guys for joining me this evening, and I will see you back here next Tuesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks.